there any constituency statements by honourable members? And I call the member for New England.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and delightful to see you here today. Madam Deputy Speaker, this fuel crisis, we've been told there's more fuel here. It must be fuel from the mystery fuel company, because we can't actually see it. I'm absolutely astounded of the lack of comprehension of exactly what is rippling through our economy, and it is not going to stop. It is going to get worse, Madam Deputy Speaker. I just want to enlighten people about the sort of areas this is now going into that you probably never considered. I have here correspondence from the funeral industry. The funeral industry is running out of fuel. This is from one of the major funeral homes in my area. So your funeral industry is running short. They can't basically, with people who are deceased, move the body from where it is out into the country back to where it can be, the soul's gone, it's just the body, but where the body can be, I suppose, stored. And we're told there's not a crisis. Apparently there's more fuel out there. I've got it. We now have cotton pickers sitting in paddocks in $1 million crops that can't move. The crops will fire. If you can't strip them, the crop is gone. This is happening right now. We have carnivals for sport that have to be cancelled because the people can't get to the carnivals for schools, for young schools. We have people who just have to drive a small distance, but they're doing it tough to get to a depot to get to work. They're saying our budget just doesn't allow us to do this anymore. And every dollar they spend on fuel is a dollar they can't spend on food. We have the building industry in my area talking about in summer with PVC, which we use during a drought, and we're heading to a massive drought with El Nino, that 27 to 36% increase just in April. And of course, people are saying this is untenable. In getting glues for the construction of certain beams, of composite timber beams, they're going to be running out of glue. As I said, PVC plumbing pipes. This has got to be taken vastly more proficiently than it currently is. Now, if all these premiers are going to come down here on Monday and have their powwow, then I'll tell you, you better get out and start rationing, because if you don't ration, it's going to ration you.
I thank the member, and I call the Assistant Minister for Science, Technology and the Digital Economy.
I rise today to speak about an issue of profound importance to my community: the protection of Parramatta's colonial heritage. 3 of Australia's most historically significant colonial sites in Parramatta are currently under assessment for inclusion on the National Heritage List. The first is Elizabeth Farm, the oldest surviving European building in Australia and birthplace of the merino wool industry, built by John and Elizabeth MacArthur. Elizabeth's story in particular stands as a testament to the women who helped found this nation. The second is Experiment Farm Cottage, where James Roos, the first former convict to receive a land grant, proved the colony could feed itself. And the third, Hambledon Cottage, one of Australia's most intact early colonial homes, offers a rare glimpse into domestic life in the 1800s. No other precinct in Australia holds that combination so intact, in such close proximity. And now it is under threat. A proposed development of 463 multi-storey dwellings at Gregory Place risks permanently altering this heritage landscape. Its sightlines, its archaeological fabric, and the skyline that frames Our Lady of Lebanon Co-Cathedral. This is Australia's largest Maronite Catholic parish, 30,000 people, 4 decades of community. It's where Lebanese Australians baptise their children, keep their language alive and gather as a community. To place a development of this scale on that horizon would be a profound intrusion. Parramatta has the highest number of housing approvals in New South Wales, and I'm proud of that. We're not against housing, housing matters. But growth without memory is not progress. A great city must value its past as much as its future. The significance of these buildings extends to the land around them. Decades of deliberate effort have gone into restoring this landscape to an authentic rural setting. Houses were demolished, roads rerouted, and land carefully acquired. That painstaking work makes the threat of this development all the more devastating. Parramatta has fought for its heritage before, and it will fight again. Hambledon Cottage was twice threatened with demolition in the mid-20th century, earmarked for factories and saved only by community action. We saved them then, we cannot afford to lose it now. That is why I am engaging with the Australian Heritage Council to urgently finalise its assessment and working with Minister Murray Watt to prioritise national heritage recognition without delay. I've launched a community petition to support this call, and I encourage every Australian who values their heritage to add their name to that petition.
And I call the member for Capricornia.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise today to acknowledge the importance of Minerals Week here in Canberra, a time when we recognise one of the foundational pillars of our national economy, and in particular the immense contribution of the coal industry to communities like those I represent in central Queensland. In my electorate, mining isn't an abstract concept, it's a way of life. It's the jobs that put food on the table, the apprenticeships that give our young people a future, and the small businesses that thrive because of the strength of our resources sector. Coal in particular remains a cornerstone of that strength. Central Queensland is home to some of the highest quality metallurgical coal in the world, essential for steel making, for infrastructure and for development not just here in Australia but across the globe. Every hospital built, every bridge constructed, every piece of critical infrastructure relies on the very product our regions proudly supply. And while there are many conversations about the future of energy, we must remain grounded in reality. Global demand for coal, especially metallurgical coal, remains strong. Our trading partners continue to rely on it, and Australia is uniquely positioned to provide it responsibly, efficiently and sustainably. The scale of this contribution is clear. In the Fitzroy region alone, the resources sector delivers $1.7 billion in wages, supports nearly 17,000 direct jobs and contributes $3.4 billion in spending across more than 2,500 local businesses and over 500 community organisations. In total, it underpins $10.6 billion in regional economic activity and supports more than 56,000 jobs. What sets our industry apart is not just the resource itself, but the people behind it. The coal industry in central Queensland supports tens of thousands of jobs directly and indirectly. These are not just numbers, these are families, communities and entire towns where livelihoods depend on a strong and stable resources sector. Moreover, the economic benefits extend far beyond regional areas. Royalties from coal mining help fund essential services right across our state, schools, hospitals, roads benefiting from every Queenslander. During Minerals Week, it's also important to recognise the industry's ongoing commitment to innovation and environmental responsibility. Companies are investing in new technologies to reduce emissions, improve efficiency and ensure that mining operations coexist with environmental stewardship. We should be backing these efforts, not undermining them, because when we support our coal industry, we are supporting Australian jobs, Australian exports and Australians' economic resilience. Central Queensland has long powered this nation and continues to play a vital role in powering the world. Let us use Minerals Week not just as a moment of recognition, but as a call to stand firmly behind an industry that delivers so much for so many. Thank you.
I thank the member, and I call the member for for Solomon.
Yep. Thanks, Deputy Speaker. Great news. The latest international student data shows that Charles Darwin University in the electorate of Solomon in Darwin is powering ahead when it comes to the fastest growing destination for international students in Australia. This confirms that the Territory is as the greatest beneficiary of the Albanese Labor government's policies to share the benefits of international education equally across Australia. Department of Education November 2025 year-to-date data shows that international student commencements, reflecting new students in the Territory, has increased by 20%, rising from 2,282 in 2024 to 2,743 in 2025, a 20% lift. The Territory has outpaced every other state and territory since 2019, with a 41% increase to 2025. The Territory's strong performance stands out against the national trends, which show the government's policies are working to moderate overall student numbers nationally, while sharing the benefits more fairly with regional areas like us in the top end. The Northern Territory is the biggest winner, and additional places have been allocated to universities like ours, like Charles Darwin University, that have demonstrated efforts on key government priorities: new student housing, engagement with Southeast Asia, and market diversification. The government made tough decisions to safeguard the integrity and long-term sustainability of Australia's world-class international education sector, and to share the benefits more fairly with every state and territory, and in particular the regions. The Albanese government's policies are working, with international student numbers on a more sustainable path and regions benefiting the most. This week, I also heard a story that has really stayed with me. I learned about the important role that CDU midwifery students and graduates are playing in supporting women across the Territory. Many newly arrived families in Darwin do not yet have access to Medicare supported services for pre- and postnatal care. Through their clinical placements, our students are helping to fill this vital gap, supporting women at an incredibly important time in their lives and contributing to better health outcomes for mums and babies. It felt like a really fitting reflection during the week of International Women's Day, with people coming together to support women and a new generation of health professionals that are stepping forward with skill, compassion and care. It is just one more example of how Charles Darwin University students and graduates are adding value to our community, both in Darwin and Palmerston itself and Greater Darwin, but also throughout the Northern Territory. And I just want to thank all of those educators at Charles Darwin University who are doing so much to bring forward a new generation of health professionals that are more likely to stay in our beautiful Northern Territory.
I thank the member, and I call the member for Fowler.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Reserve Bank lifted cash rate to 4.1%, and that is the second increase in just 2 months. And for millions of Australians, that decision has just rewritten their household budgets overnight. Families in my community are now paying the price for an inflation problem they did not create. And they're asking the very simple question, who is responsible? Because part of that answer sits right here in this place. When government spending remains high and the Reserve Bank is left to do all of the heavy lifting, it's everyday Australians who carry the burden. We have seen the pattern. When rates come down, the government is quick to take credit. But when they go up, that responsibility is pushed elsewhere. You cannot have it both ways. Let me be honest. Many of us in this place will not feel the full impact of these decisions. And if we did, we would be moving very quickly to fix the structural issues behind them. But families and small business owners in communities like mine will feel it immediately. They will feel it when they fill up the petrol station. They will feel it in their mortgage repayments. They will feel it every day as the cost of living continues to rise. In Fowler, the median weekly household income is just $1,403. For a family with a mortgage, even a small rate rise of 25 basis points can mean around $100 extra a month. 2 increases back-to-back only add to that pressure. That is money that cannot go towards groceries, petrol, school fees or rent. And in Fowler, transport is not optional. The average household has 1.7 vehicles and nearly half of all the households have 2 or more cars. Not because people want to drive, but because they don't have any other public transport and no real alternative. Public transport simply does not meet the needs of many families in my area. People need to get to work, drop their kids off at school, attend appointments and keep their small business running. At the same time, global instability is pushing fuel prices higher. Conflict in the Middle East is adding further pressure at the Bowser, and families are feeling that hit straight away. This is happening exactly at the wrong time. When I was first elected, I called on the government to cut the fuel excise to provide immediate relief. That call was dismissed, replaced with short-term announcements and temporary measures. But families do not need short-term sugar hits. They need real structural solutions. Now is the time for the government to step up, to have the courage to make the decisions to restore confidence for working Australians. Because people in communities like Fowler work hard, they pay their taxes, they do everything right. And when families are doing everything right and still falling behind, it's not them that's failing, it's us. So I call on the government to revisit my original request to halve the fuel excise, which last year delivered almost $27 billion in revenue. A 6 months pause would take real pressure off families and small businesses as well as inflation. Thank you.
I thank the member and I call the member for Gorton.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. My community of Gorton is full of young people building their futures. In my first term, I've started a tradition to recognise the leadership and achievements of some of these incredible young people, awarding students who have made a positive difference in their school and beyond. It's my great pleasure to congratulate the winners of the 2025 Alice Jordan Baird Gorton Young Leader Awards: Carla Tarquinio, Orana Johan, Baraka Ngugi, Emma Taylor, Jacob Snogarak, Amelia Garcia Sanchez, Prisha Radu, Mila Zamet, Xander Ridsdale, Liam Bebbington, Narasha Patharana, Chloe Osanko, Cindy Tran, Ammar Sayed, Tariq Singh, Ashnor Kaur, Guntaj Handura, Joywin Ben-Maurice, Jessie Marie Mpoesa, Tristan Duong, Lauren O, Evelyn La Rogers, April Torian, Noel Liang, Aruth Nisankar, Justine McCoy, Jessica Dang, Jacob Sweet, Kautha El Holy and Dahlia Tabone. Congratulations all, we are so proud of you. Young people offer unique insights into how the policies we make here in this chamber impact them back at home, and that's why it's so important to listen. I had the opportunity to do just that with some incredible and passionate students in my electorate at the Over Newton Leadership Summit, which brought together 75 student leaders from schools across Melbourne's northwest. We talked about everything from leadership to the importance of social media in bridging the communication gap between politicians and young people. Thank you to the wonderful team at Over Newton and the staff from neighbouring schools for creating wonderful opportunities like these for our young people to grow. I'd also like to give a special shout out to Etienne from Over Newton College, as well as Min from Caroline Chisholm Catholic College and Hywan from Gilson College, who represented their schools this week in Parliament at the 31st National Schools Constitutional Convention. Singing Five Little Ducks and learning how to count to 5 in Vietnamese, I spent this year's National Playgroup Week with the Australian Vietnamese Women's Association's Playgroup in Delahaye. Run by incredible volunteers, the Delahaye Playgroup is ensuring culture and language are being passed on to the new generation, highlighting the importance of investing in our youngest community members. And our government is doing just that, with a $1 billion commitment to establish the Building Early Education Fund, increasing the supply of high-quality early childhood education and care places in Australia. I had the pleasure of seeing this investment in action in my electorate when the Minister for Education, Minister for Early Childhood Education and Victorian Minister Lizzie Blanthorne and I opened the Early Learning Victoria Garong in Kings Park. A shout out to the truly dedicated early learning team there. Last week, I also dropped off Easter hampers at 9 ELCs across our community because the work of early childhood educators in shaping the minds of the next generation doesn't go unnoticed.
I thank the member and I call the member for Cook.
Today I wish to acknowledge 3 achievements unique to the stunning electorate of Cook. Firstly, Bait Bay's beaches were aptly named the best beach of the year in Australia for 2026. Now, this national recognition isn't just about the stunning scenery, and it is very stunning, Deputy Speaker. Anyone who's walked along Cronulla, Allura or Wanda or Green Hills knows how beautiful those beaches are. But it's also about pride in the local community, environmental stewardship and keeping those beaches safe. And we are lucky to have hundreds, if not thousands, of volunteers who walk along those beaches, collect rubbish. Those across our 4 surf clubs, Cronulla, North Cronulla, Allura and Wanda, who give up hundreds of thousands of hours over the years to keep those beaches safe. We thank you. We thank you for your part in making this the best beach in Australia. One of those volunteers is Jensen Wade, and Jensen proves you're never too young to make a difference. Jensen organised the Jensen Hates Waste beach cleanup in Cronulla Beach, and the results were extraordinary. With the help of the local community, Jensen collected more than 12,000 pieces of rubbish from Cronulla Beach and the sand and surrounding hills. Those 12,000 pieces of plastic, debris and litter are no longer polluting our beautiful beach and no longer threatening marine life. Cronulla is one of the jewels of the Sutherland Shire and one of the jewels of Australia. And thanks to young people like Jensen and your mates who were there to help you that day, it's being looked after by the next generation. I wish to celebrate a truly iconic event in the local Sutherland Shire calendar, the Shark Island Swim. This legendary open water swim has been a fixture of Sydney's summer for more than 30 years, bringing together swimmers of all ages, all abilities to test themselves against the ocean and the spectacular backdrop that is Shark Island. I'd like to congratulate Harry Kane, who won both the 1 kilometre and 2.3 kilometre race, as well as Thomas Velusis and Steve Boxall, who came second and third in the 1 kilometre. Also Bo Griggs and Charlotte Bomer, who came second and third in the 2.3 kilometre. I'd like to thank Cronulla Surf Lifesaving Club and indeed all the members of the Bait Bay clubs who helped put on the event and helped organise it on the day. And I'd also like to thank Scott Charlton and Sydney Airport, who sponsored that event and sponsor so many great events in southern Sydney and Cronulla. And there's one last person I'd like to thank, Brian Havilah, the 91-year-old who completed that 1 kilometre swim. Brian, you're a legend.
I thank the member and I call the member for Deakin.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Today I wanted to wish a happy Nowruz to my local Iranian community and to everyone who celebrates this special day. The member for Menzies and I marked Nowruz with a morning tea with the Iranian community leaders from across our electorates, which are neighbour in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, and it was fantastic to be joined by the Minister for Home Affairs, Immigration and Citizenship, Cybersecurity and the Arts. It is a very difficult time for our Australian Iranian community. While any damage and diminishment of the Iranian regime is welcome news to many in our community, the immediate threat to the safety of friends and family still in Iran is incredibly distressing. And of course, there is disagreement and tension within our Iranian Australian diaspora as well. They are not a monolithic group. They've got different perspectives on what the military operations are achieving in Iran and how to go about achieving a society that is more peaceful and democratic going forward. However, they are united in desire for peace and united desire for greater respect for human rights for the people of Iran going forward, and are all hopeful that that can be achieved one way or another. Of course, it is in a democratic society normal and healthy to have discussions about what's going on in the world and share differing perspectives on how best to go forward. But I know it's been frustrating that there have been some bad faith political actors and people who should know better attempting to box the Iranian Australian community into a single view. Ultimately, like all Australians, the community is driven by the love and concern they have for friends and family. So it was fantastic to have the Minister out for the morning tea to hear from the community their very real concerns about being able to contact loved ones given the communication blackout, concerns about how their expressions might be interfered with or lead to retribution by the IRGC for loved ones who remain in Iran, and some of the concerns they have for cohesion within the community as well. So I really want to thank the House of Persia for hosting us that morning, and particularly Rana and Afrouz, who do a great job representing the Iranian Australian community in Deakin. We heard overwhelmingly support for the efforts to keep people connected to the regime and the IRGC out of Australia. There is also very understandable concern that innocent family members may be able to come to Australia, unable to come to Australia if they're caught out with changes to the immigration system. Of course, we recently announced, and the Minister announced yesterday, that there will be a pause restricting those on Iranian passports holding visitor visas from coming to Australia for a period of 6 months unless they get a permitted entry permit. It was good to be able to have an honest conversation about the impact of those laws, clarifying. If I could just pause. A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division and subsequent divisions.
And the member for Deakin in continuation.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In relation to the arrival control determinations, I note that the Minister has confirmed that sympathetic consideration will be given to the parents of Australian citizens for permitted travel permits. I would like to thank the Iranian Australian community in Deakin for their continued engagement and wish all Iranian Australians a happy Nowruz.
I thank the member and I call the member for Barara.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the Parliament and the people of Barara, I want to congratulate Archbishop Anthony Randazzo, the Catholic Bishop of Broken Bay, who was appointed by Pope Leo as Prefect for the Dicastery for Legislative Texts. This is the highest role currently held by an Australian in the Vatican Curia. He's one of a handful of Australians who have run dicasteries, including Cardinals Pell, Cassidy and Knox. Archbishop Randazzo grew up in Queensland, where his father migrated from Lipari, Italy, and ran a greengrocery. Ordained as a priest in 1991, he worked in Rome as a canon lawyer. He returned to Australia running the seminary in Brisbane before being appointed the Auxiliary Bishop in Sydney in 2016 and the Bishop of Broken Bay in 2019. Pope Francis, seeing his gifts for leadership, appointed him the President of the Federation of Catholic Bishops' Conferences of Oceania and the Apostolic Administrator of the Ordinariate of Our Lady of the Southern Cross. Catholics in Broken Bay will be feeling mixed emotions about this appointment. On the one hand, enormous pride that the gifts of the man who has steered the church in our community have been recognised, and on the other hand, a sense of sadness that we're losing such a good shepherd. Archbishop Anthony's leadership in Broken Bay has been transformative. He led the church through the challenging period of COVID when churches closed and people were physically isolated, and then he brought people back to physical worship again. He participated in the Synod for a Synodal Church and implemented those ideas in Broken Bay, encouraging both ordained and lay leaders to play a role in the leadership of the church. Building on the foundations of his predecessor, Archbishop Peter Comensoli, he transformed Catholic schools with new governance, improved accountability, improved academic performance and a greater focus on Catholic identity that has seen Broken Bay schools go to over 19,000 children, the highest number ever educated by the diocese. And his pioneering work on the Eileen O'Connor schools for children with disability and neurodiversity has been a great innovation. In 2024, when for the first time in many years Christmas and Hanukkah coincided, horrified at the anti-Semitism taking root in this country, he brought faith leaders from across his diocese and encouraged Christians to put a candle in the window at Christmas to demonstrate solidarity with the Jewish community and devoted his homily on Christmas Eve to combating anti-Semitism. Last year he contacted me in early December to tell me he was going to do the same thing again. He put out a post on the 13th of December with his candle in the window, and then the massacre at Bondi occurred the following evening. On that night, he led our country by example. The simple act of putting a candle in the window to show solidarity with the Jewish people captured the imagination of our country, and millions of people, from the Governor-General down, followed his example. His local leadership has been amazing. His moral leadership has been nation-defining. On a personal level, I want to say how much I've appreciated his friendship and his very good sense of humour. Archbishop Anthony Randazzo is one of the finest people I know, and I've been lucky to work with him during his time as the Bishop of Broken Bay. On behalf of everyone in our community, I wish him good luck and Godspeed, and we will all be praying for him in his new role.
I thank the member for Barara and I call the Assistant Minister for Social Services, Prevention of Family Violence.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Today I rise to recognise the important work of an amazing group, the Tough Guys Book Club. A national survey by Healthy Mail has found that 43% of men are impacted by loneliness, and some long-term trends show a decline in close friendships amongst men. For many men, connections used to be formed in community groups, in sporting clubs, in churches or unions, institutions that maybe aren't as prevalent as they once were. And that's why today I'd like to take the opportunity to highlight the incredible work of the Tough Guy Book Club in fighting loneliness. This is a story that started in 2012. Shay Layton, the founder of Tough Guy Book Club, was living a life that by many societal standards would appear fortunate. He had a successful career, relationships with his work peers, but on the inside, he says he was feeling unfulfilled and lonely. And one day, while Shay was thinking about this with one of his friends and talking about it, they were looking for an answer, and the idea of the book club was formed. Today, the work of Shay and other members of the book club is challenging the mentality that tough men don't talk about their feelings, and they're working hard towards creating healthier relationships for themselves and for other men. Shay says, how the hell is reading, you know, picking up a book and learning new shit, becomes something that's considered the opposite of toughness? That's a direct quote, Deputy Speaker, I promise. I wasn't just me saying that. So I hope you understand. I can assure you there is nothing tough about knowing less than the next guy. Today, the Tough Guy Club has grown from 2 friends meeting at a pub in Collingwood to having over 1,300 attendees over 140 locations in 8 countries. That's over 5,000 meetings of healthy conversations between everyday men. Something that I love about Shay's work is that it's dedicated to supporting men from all classes, all backgrounds and all contexts. I believe that Tough Guys is the kind of initiative that we need to see more of when addressing men's mental health. And in Cooper, there are Tough Guy meetings in Preston, Reservoir, Northcote, Thornbury and Alphington. Shay came to my office recently to tell me about the work he's doing, and he's absolutely warmed my heart. He told me story after story of men finding connection and fulfilment from having these deeper conversations. You see, Deputy Speaker, the books start the conversations, and the themes in the books often lead to other important topics that help men discuss their feelings and personal things that are happening. Or maybe not. Maybe they do just talk about the book, because just being there together is an important first step to enable deeper conversations. Supporting men's mental health benefits our whole community too. It encourages less stigma around help-seeking, more positive relationships, stronger and safer communities. Fantastic work to Shay and the whole team.
I thank the member and I call the member for Maranoa.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. 3 weeks ago, the Albanese government told us there was no fuel crisis, that there was no problem and that we were all going to be able to get on our way and we didn't need to panic buy. It was all good. And even yesterday, the Minister for Climate Change and Energy tells us that the supply is there and we've got it. Well, the good people of Maranoa would tell you different. And you want to love the lived experience of people in Maranoa, go to the town of Texas. 800 people live in Texas and they have a fuel station that has no fuel. Their closest fuel station is 80 kilometres away. Go to Wallangarra on the border of New South Wales. Again, 70 people live there, but it's on the New England Highway, no fuel. You want to go to Leeburn, just down the road from where I live, no fuel. You want to go to Alra, where Bartrans, a locally owned company that supplies fuel to many of the primary producers there that are trying to harvest sorghum at the moment. No fuel, not only for the service station, but for the farmers. This is a disconnect from this government to the real world. They've worked in the superficial rather than the reality of the lived experience of understanding our supply chains, understanding how our economy works, and understand how regional Australia works. Because let me tell you, if we don't have the fuel, you don't have the food. If we don't have the fuel, we don't have those iron ore and coal exports going to a port to pay the bills for you to sit here. This is the stark reality of a government that has been asleep at the wheel, that has no understanding of our supply chains and our economy because they don't care and they don't understand. Let me tell you, there are people in regional Australia today that are frightened and frustrated because we have a government and a minister that is living in ideology rather than practical reality. Now, this is about making sure they use the levers they've got. The minister knows to the litre where every litre of fuel is at the moment, and yet he is not using his powers to direct it to where it's needed, and that is regional Australia. And let me tell you, not only are farmers and miners going to hurt, but we are about to go in Western Queensland into our peak tourist season. And we're in the Stockman's Hall of Fame, the Qantas Founders Museum, the Dinosaur Museum up in Winton. 60,000 people normally visit that between Easter and October. Well, let me give you 6-4 on this, Minister. There will be no one going out there. There will be no money spent in Western Queensland because they can't afford it, let alone get the supply to get to the next town. This is where you have a minister that is out of his depth, that has no understanding of what his role is, the powers that he has at his disposal, and yet he has failed to use them. And we have a Prime Minister that is complicit in the inability to be able to step up and lead our nation. This is a moment for this Prime Minister. He missed it with Bondi and now he's missing it with fuel. He's gone missing in action. This government has gone missing in action, and regional Australia is paying the price of an inept government, an inept minister that should be held to account. And if he can't, he should be sacked, and he should be sacked today. And if the Prime Minister's got any guts, he'll do it today.
I thank the member and I call the member for Chifley.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. Our part of northwestern Sydney, the infrastructure needs have been underinvested and have not been met for years, despite the fact that we have phenomenal growth with an expected 200,000 people moving into our part of the world. An example, since 2019, I've been pushing for the upgrade of Richmond Road to be able to better carry the number of cars that need to use that road, with huge housing developments plus commercial and industrial developments there. In 2026, we are finally seeing the upgrade of that road, following commitments by the Albanese government and the Minns government, over $500 million going into that massive upgrade, despite the fact we asked federal Liberal and New South Wales Liberal governments for years to get that work done. And the only time the New South Wales government sought to upgrade the road is that they made an announcement on the eve of the last state election to put money in, which was a complete and utter disgrace. Private transport, road upgrades, very important. Public transport, just as important. What we need to see is not all the movement happen by cars, but we also need to see the movement of people via rail. And the biggest missing link in the metro is from Tallawong to St Mary's, where we do need to see the extension of the metro, and we do need to see both federal and state governments chipping in to make that happen. I've been petitioning residents locally to be able to sign up and show that they support this, and they have in their droves. The other good thing has been that we have recently seen Infrastructure Australia, in their infrastructure priority list, have just acknowledged that this is a nationally significant priority, extending the metro from Tallawong to St Mary's. I don't know why the former Liberal government stopped it at Tallawong. It made no sense and was a bizarre decision. But we've got a chance to fix this up now, and Infrastructure Australia agrees that that should happen. At the moment, people turn up to Tallawong, they can't get parking in the commuter car park. From Tallawong, the Ponds, Schofields, down to Marsden Park, huge number of people trying to get onto that rail network and can't. So with Infrastructure Australia now saying that this should be upgraded, this is really important, connecting two major metro lines, linking the northwest directly to the south, and all the jobs that will come with it. And importantly, having Richmond Road upgraded plus the metro will unlock the ability to develop the Marsden Park CBD, which will become the biggest CBD in Blacktown and, dare I say, in our part of Western Sydney. But what we absolutely need is that investment. People are dying to see that happen in terms of the extension of the rail line plus the other things that need to occur. They've waited too long. They should not be forced to endure any more.
I thank the member, and I call the member for Riverina.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The curriculum vitae of Wagga Wagga's Tim Rose describes him as being a chemical engineer with degrees in both environmental science and business. It talks about his more than a quarter of a century of experience in industrial operations and certainly in re-refining. What it doesn't say is that he is a risk taker, and indeed he is. He is the proprietor and brain, along with his wife Camille, of the Southern Oil Refinery at Wagga Wagga and the Northern Oil Refinery at Gladstone. And here is the potential to unlock the key to our national fuel crisis. Because what Southern and Northern Oil Refineries do is they re-refine sump oil. They have the potential to indeed, in Gladstone, turn prickly pear, acacia, old tyres into usable oil, usable fuel. And this could well hold in future the key to future oil capability, sovereignty and success. He has had a proposal on the desk of the Minister for Climate Change and Energy for some time, for some years, and sadly it has not been acted upon. But since 2001 and since 2014, the Southern and Northern oil refineries respectively have produced millions of litres of oil. Indeed, the current equivalent is 50 million litres of oil at Gladstone and 20 at Wagga Wagga. These are not insignificant numbers, particularly with the crisis that is currently besetting the nation. And if we can invest in this and have the political will and the pluck to do the right thing and to make sure that the oil stewardship program, to make sure that the funding, to make sure that the capacity is at those two plants, then we can create jobs and, more importantly, create oil. And isn't that what we're all seeking to do at the moment? And then, of course, you've got Dick Honan, another great risk taker, has invested more than $1 billion in this nation in infrastructure in recent years. Dick Honan of Manildra, he is proposing and has proposed for many, many years an ethanol mandate. We have to look at these sorts of things as this oil crisis, this fuel crisis, confronts our farmers, the greatest risk takers in this nation, because if they don't get the fuel to fill up their tanks, to sow the crops, then we are going to be in a world of hurt. It's not just a fuel security problem, it's a food security problem, it's a national security issue.
The member for Fremantle.
Deputy Speaker, I want to pay tribute to some of the wonderful volunteer organisations in the Fremantle electorate, and especially to the people who put their time and energy into making our community more inclusive, more connected, more fun, making our community healthier and happier, for providing a range of ways to be involved through sport, through arts and crafts, through initiatives that provide practical assistance and cost savings, and that combat loneliness and isolation at the same time. The federal government's volunteer grants program makes a small but important contribution to all those fantastic outcomes by helping to fund equipment and training and IT resources that amplify the effort that local people supply. In my time as the local representative, I've been glad to deliver 148 volunteer grants with more than $515,000 in practical, focused support. And in the latest round of grants, there are a number of what I regard as characteristically generous and big-hearted recipients. The Hub 6163 in Hamilton Hill is a great example. It's a community centre that hosts all kinds of engaging groups and activities, from the Freo Steiner Playgroup to the South Freo Writers Group to Alcoholics Anonymous, and it facilitates life-affirming bits and pieces from yoga to Pilates to singing. On the occasion that I visited recently, the Hub was alive with the machine hum and warm conversation of the Sustainable Sewing Group, and I'm rapt that the volunteer grant will support this vital community centre's operational costs, insurance and communications expenses. I also recently caught up with the good folk from the Coolbellup Panthers Amateur Football Club, President Adrian, Club Secretary John and some other members, to see how they were going with their upgraded point of sale system, funded with a grant to help their bar and canteen volunteers and to make the club more viable and less administratively painful, especially for the volunteer treasurers. The Panthers do a brilliant job of delivering the great physical, social and emotional health benefits of team sport for young people across a range of culturally diverse backgrounds, with lots of First Nations kids, in addition to new Australians from places like Cambodia, Croatia, Ethiopia, India and New Zealand. So go Panthers. Finally, Deputy Speaker, it was a joy to pop into Harmony Primary School and meet with Christine and Sam from the school's canteen, which now benefits from a new commercial freezer and 2 new commercial fridges, thanks to an application from the Harmony PNC, which resulted in $4,750 in grant support. All the canteen's food is prepared fresh on site, with a focus on healthy, tasty, colourful and waste-free options. Deputy Speaker, all these community organisations represent vibrant patches of supportive local colour in the great warming quilt of neighbourhood support that spans across Freo, East Freo and Coburn. The fact that so much of this sustaining support is provided by volunteers is an uplifting reflection of our values, of our inclination to connect with and lift up our fellow residents and citizens, and being in a position to enable and amplify that labour of love through the volunteer grants is one of the great privileges of my work.
Thank you. The member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. How do you create a fuel crisis in a country that exports energy? How do you take one of the most resource-rich nations and push it to the point where everyday Australians are wondering if they can get to work today and tomorrow and the next day? Well, the Albanese Labor government's managed to do that. They've managed to achieve what Australian wants. As of yesterday, more than 500 petrol stations are dry, and I think there are more because I'm hearing multiple reports just in my community alone that petrol stations have run out of fuel. They're not low, they're not limited, they're completely empty. Along Mulgoa Road, one of the busiest corridors in my electorate of Lindsay, nearly every single petrol station was either out of diesel or out of fuel altogether last night. What are they paying? E10 is averaging $2.47. 98 unleaded is high as getting towards $3, and diesel is up over $3 a litre. And these prices aren't stabilising, they are skyrocketing, rising by around 10 cents per litre every single day. And this is not normal. It is not normal. This is not a cycle. This is an absolute crisis, and it took the Minister for Energy kicking and screaming to declare this, to actually notice this last week when there was nothing to see here. While Australians are queuing for fuel, what is the government saying? Minister Catherine King says we've got plenty of fuel in this country. Minister Claire O'Neill insists we have the fuel circulating in the economy that we need. And the Energy Minister Chris Bowen declaring that a national fuel emergency is not really on the agenda. Not on the agenda? So what do they call this? What do they call empty bowsers, soaring prices and Australians lining up just to get to work? Out in the real world, it looks very much like an emergency. Carol, who owns the historic Nepean Bell, told me her suppliers are now adding extra charges just to cover their fuel costs, while at the same time her own diesel bill has doubled. She's been hit twice, a double whammy as she calls it. Shane, a hard-working local, told me he paid $150 just to fill up his car. Now he's questioning whether he can even get to work. Ricky, a truck driver, put it plainly, diesel at over 319 cents per litre. If trucks stop, then so will our nation. Sam has been tracking prices day by day, watching them climb not weekly but daily, locking in one price only to see it jump dramatically within 24 hours and then again the next day. Australians are asking, where is the government? Because from where they're standing, it feels like no one is in charge. This isn't just a fuel issue, it is a cost of living crisis, and it is supercharged. The country is running on empty, literally, and Labor's response, instead of fixing the problem, they have a czar. Because apparently when the Energy Minister fails, you don't solve the crisis, you rename it and move it on to someone else. You rebrand it and you outsource it. The appointment of this czar is a glowing, flashing neon sign that says the Energy Minister is not doing his job. We have a government scrambling.
Thank you. The member for Brisbane.
Brisbane is home to a diverse multicultural community where more than 31% of our residents are born overseas and more than 200 languages are spoken. Our city is a vibrant mix of cultural influences reflected in the various foods and festivals and neighbourhoods. Now, these last few weeks, our community has celebrated Lunar New Year, Lent, Ramadan and Eid, and in the coming weeks we will gather for Easter and Passover. Deputy Speaker, listening to community members and hearing their stories and sharing their as they share their traditions, it's a great part of being a Member of Parliament. But while Brisbane is vibrant and an inclusive community, not everyone feels safe and valued. Last Friday, I joined the Minister for Citizenship, Customs and Multicultural Affairs to visit the Brisbane Synagogue to hear from members of our Jewish community. It is an understatement to say the least that it's been a very difficult time for that community. The Bondi attack was a stern test of our national character, and as always, Australians have responded with the best of our national character by working together and putting an arm around each other. However, that community still feels scared and they feel they cannot be themselves. There is more work to do, and the Royal Commission will be an important guide to that. But in this country, no one should be fearful of who they are, and we must do everything we can to stop fear and hatred from becoming permanent. Australia clearly is stronger because of our multiculturalism. Our diversity has created opportunities that other countries envy, and that's why I will always show up to listen and advocate for every community in Brisbane. Our differences are not something to tolerate, they are something to celebrate. Now, Deputy Speaker, I also visited the Northside Mosque in Lutwyche to meet the Imam and the Executive Committee members and to wish them a joyful Eid. We talked about the Islam faith being grounded in compassion and kindness, how many members of the community who now call Australia home are here to build a better life. The importance of no matter what faith you follow, you should be able to worship and practice your beliefs without fear. Now, the mosque has been a part of the Lutwyche community for over 45 years, and it's a big part of the local community. They hold open days for locals to come and visit and to get to know their congregation. They also used an adjoining park to put on community events and many religious events. In fact, the morning I was there with Minister Hill, they had hosted over 2,000 people to mark the end of Ramadan. I believe that Australia is at our best when we choose unity, compassion and care for one another, and when we must always seek out ways to support our neighbours, our friends and our community. One of my aims as the member for Brisbane is to build a more harmonious and inclusive community. Deputy Speaker, social weakness is really distinguished by ignorance, intolerance and individualism, but social strength is just as strong when we accept differences, when we celebrate what makes us unique, and we're stronger when we stand together.
Thank you. Member for Flinders.
This week we have spent much time in discussion of Australia's relationship with Europe, one with which I've had a deep interest for almost 40 years. I lived in France in my teens and studied in Germany in my 20s, and in this way I say France got a piece of my heart and Germany a piece of my head sufficiently early for both places to feel a bit like home. In both lands I developed a fascination for language and for culture, and as so many Australians know, speaking another language is a door to curiosity and tolerance, a magical power to stand in different shoes and to sit comfortably with diversity. Those experiences also made me profoundly grateful for home. Australia's egalitarian spirit, its levelling self-deprecation, its spectacular generosity and good humour, its bounteous beauty, and the vastness of our breathtaking landscapes. This week we took a moment to reflect on Australia's most enduring and consequential relationship, that is our relationship with Europe, built on a shared history, shared sacrifice and a shared future vision of what democracy ought to look like. We are the proud custodian of the longest uninterrupted culture on earth, but the story of modern Australia began in the traditions, the languages, legal systems and faiths of our European founders and the generations which followed. Europe's gratitude to Australia is profound and still practised daily. When the world descended into catastrophe in 1914, Australia answered Europe's call. Of our less than 5 million Australians at the time, we sent 416,000 to war and 60,000 never came home. Thousands remain lost in the mud of the Western Front and in the skies over France and Belgium. Recently, I walked through the Commonwealth war graves in Ypres with Angus Campbell. You cannot get a better guide. Angus was born in Rosebud Hospital, a man of the Peninsula who has served our nation in war and in peace and now serves as our ambassador in the European Union. We are still sending our best to Europe to serve. Today's relationship between Australia and Europe is mature and multifaceted. We are united by democratic values, the rule of law, and a belief in the fundamental dignity of the individual. We are trading partners, research collaborators, and together contribute to international institutions which, despite their many imperfections, remain worth defending and reforming together. We share today's battles, not just in Ukraine, but in rebuilding a rules-based international order, resisting those who test boundaries and fighting against economic coercion, foreign interference and extremism. Our region is no longer peripheral to European strategic thinking. As I saw on a recent trip to NATO, what happens in our sphere of influence attracts global trade, our sphere of influence affects global trade and stability, and Europe now understands this. The ties between Australia and Europe are old and deep, forged in the crucible of shared loss and renewed through decades of shared prosperity. This week we remembered we have rebuilt shattered civilisations together before, and in the future we can meet the defining tests of this century.
The member for Hazlitt.
Sorry, excuse me. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. At a time when the global economy is becoming more fragmented, it is more important than ever for the government to take advantage of opportunities for growth and long-term partnerships. The trade agreement between Australia and the European Union is not just another deal. It is a strategic partnership with one of the world's largest and most stable markets, worth a staggering $10 billion a year for the Australian economy. Back home in Hazlitt, this translates to opportunity, income and jobs for local businesses and local families. In the Swan Valley, we are home to generations of growers and winemakers who've built their livelihoods over decades. Pioneers like the Yukich family at Nicola Estate have been producing wine since 1929. This agreement removes barriers to allow them to export into Europe. For Hazlitt, it means lower tariffs, but access and a fairer shot at competing in a global market. It means Swan Valley growers can expand their reach, grow their businesses and invest in the future with greater confidence. And it's not just wine. Across agriculture, beef, sheep meat, nuts, fruit, olive oil, Australian producers will benefit from the reduced barriers and expanded quotas. That translates directly into jobs, investments and stronger regional communities in economies, including in Hasluck. But the significance of this agreement goes beyond economics. In a world of growing uncertainty, who we trade with matters. The European Union shares Australia's commitment to high standards on labour, on the environment and on the rule of law. This agreement strengthens ties with trusted partners and anchors Australia in a network of like-minded economies. It is quite simply about resilience. And yet, at a time when 27 European nations have come together to back this partnership, we see hesitation at home. Instead of matching that cooperation, the Liberals and the National Party have chosen to seed doubt and play politics over progress. In Hasluck, people expect better than that. They expect us to back our local industries in Hazelmere and Bayswater. They expect us to support our local growers and businesses in the Swan Valley. They expect us to land trade deals in their interests, as we have with the UK, with India, with the UAE and now with the EU, just to name a few. No trade deal is ever perfect, but the test is whether it advances Australia's national interest. This one does. It opened doors for exporters, for workers and for future industries. It ensures Australia remains outward-looking, competitive and connected in a changing world. And for Hasluck, it delivers real opportunity where it matters most. So I say to the opposition, get on board and back in Australian business and interests. And to my German colleagues who are here in Australia this week, I thank you for your support, and our relationship continues to go from strength to strength.
Thank you. The member for Wide Bay.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker, and it's great to see you back in the chair after your maternity leave.
Thank you.
Speaker, Noosa and its surf life-saving community lost a passionate advocate in November last year with the passing of Ross Thomas Fisher. Ross was a good friend to so many, including me, and he spent his life helping others. Ross and his wife Suzette moved to the Sunshine Coast from New Zealand in the 1980s. They settled in Noosa for the coastal lifestyle, where they raised their children and operated an electrical appliance and services business. Ross joined the Noosa Heads Surf Lifesaving Club in 1989, where he served in a range of roles, including many years as patrol captain before he became president in 2016. In early 2025, Ross stepped down after 9 years as president of the club, leaving a legacy that will continue to resonate through the surf lifesaving community for years to come. Ross was instrumental in establishing the Beach to Bush Surf Education Program, which gave Indigenous children from Cherbourg the opportunity to visit Noosa Heads Surf Lifesaving Club to enjoy the beach and learn water safety skills. The Cherbourg Beach to Bush partnership has been running since 2018, and Ross would regularly travel to Mergen and Cherbourg, where he taught life-saving skills in the pool before students participated in the program, travelling to Noosa for their beach education and swimming and surf activities. Ross was a man of many talents. He was chair of the Noosa Heads Surf Lifesaving Club's sponsorship committee and had been involved in the Noosa Biosphere Reserve Foundation Surf Safe Noosa campaign since its inception in 2021. A member of Noosa Rotary for more than 36 years, Ross was club president in 1994 and 5 and received one of the Rotary International's highest honours when he was recognised as a Paul Harris Fellow in 2008 and 9. From the time I was first elected to Parliament in 2016 through the many sponsor breakfasts and events where we met over the years, it was always an absolute pleasure to work with Ross. His dedication, commitment and passion shone through in everything he did. I know that Ross is sorely missed, and I extend my condolences to his wife Suzette and their family. Rest in peace, Ross Fisher.
Thank you. The member for Leichhardt.
Thank you, Speaker. 7 to 11 Mount Milman Drive, Smithfield. That is the address of the brand new urgent care clinic open for the north of Cairns. This election commitment was brought about by the people of Cairns and an army of volunteers who went door to door with a petition calling on the north of Cairns to grab an urgent care clinic. This is democracy in action. The people called for it, we were able to commit it, and now we have delivered. What was really rewarding was the amount of volunteers that would come out in the tropical heat. And the heat in a far north Queensland summer is not to be trifled with. So through the heat, the humidity and the rain, people went door to door saying, can we grab an urgent care clinic for the northern suburbs of Cairns? And it's important. And the reasons it's important is once again because of our North Queensland weather. The northern suburbs of Cairns can pull from Mossman and Kuranda. We know that people were travelling from those places all the way down to Edmonton for their urgent care, but now they only have to go as far as Smithfield. We also found that during Jasper, and with the severity of these weather events, sometimes the highway gets cut off. Now we have the ability to get quick care, urgent care, right close to home without having to traverse a flooded highway to get to the emergency department. Over 39,000 people have attended the Cairns South Urgent Care Clinic. That's 39,000 people that didn't wind up in ED waiting, taking pressure off the Cairns-based hospital. And I know that the doctors, nurses and admin staff there are very grateful for that to be taken off their plates. We expect similar numbers to come through the north of Cairns. This has been a really proud moment, not just for me, but for all of the volunteers involved who went out, got those signatures and can now see the fruits of their labour. It has been a very rewarding time in Cairns for that.
Thank you. The
Additionally,
member's time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you. In accordance with Standing Order 193, the time for members' constituency statements has concluded, and I call the clerk.
Government business, orders of the day number 1, Better and Fairer Schools Agreement Progress Report, resumption of debate on the motion to take note of the document.
The question is that the document be noted, and I call the member for Lawler.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I rise to speak today on the Better and Fairer Schools Agreement. 12 months ago, our Minister, Jason Clare, announced that we had all states and territories signed the Better and Fairer Schools Agreement, a 10-year agreement, an agreement that fixes public schools funding once and for all. And I want to talk about this today because obviously it's something close to my heart. It's close to my heart as an educator, it's close to my heart as a former principal. It is closer to my heart as the member for Lawler because I've spent the last 13 years here in the federal parliament, having left schools. And in that time, I watched the former government, the coalition government, let down my community and let down public schools across this nation. And this sets that right. This agreement means that I can be assured that the public schools in my electorate will no longer be funded more generously by the Commonwealth, where that was happening in some of our private schools locally. I now know that that student resource standard is going to be met in my public schools. I'm going to know that in all the schools in Lawler, every student is being supported, as was envisaged with the Gonski Review into school funding. Nothing could be more important than this, because education not just shapes lives, it transforms lives. And as the member for Lawler, I need the certainty that all students in the schools in my electorate are getting their fair share of the resources, but also getting resourced to a level that will see them all get the same opportunities. That's what's critically important. And so for the members, for the parents watching at home, this is about what we call the schooling resource standard. This is set as a minimum standard, minimum funding level for every student. And it is set the estimated level of total public funding each school should receive to meet the educational needs of its students. At the moment, the base per student amount is $14,467 for a child in primary school and $18,180 for a child in high school. On top of that, there should be funding that goes to loading. In other words, loading that's contextualised around need, around location, around school size, around socio-educational disadvantage, around Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander students, and around students with a disability. It means that students from those priority equity cohorts attract additional funding over the base amount, and that varies school to school. And that means that now in 2025, public school students receive on average about $21,376 in SRS funding. Now that is not met fully by the Commonwealth, but what has happened here is that something that had been set in stone by those opposite has now been removed. Those opposite left government providing certainty for private schools and doubt for public schools. A system where private schools could be assured of 100% of their student resource standard from the Commonwealth, while public schools were left with a cap of only 20% allowed under law from the Commonwealth. So in no one's mind was this seen as something that was fair across the country. It left doubt for public schools and states and territories, because those states and territories weren't guaranteed or given certainty around the level of funding that was going to be provided by the Commonwealth, because they were told that they would be left to do all of the heavy lifting. They baked in doing so, they baked in disadvantage. In doing so, they undermined our universal education system. In doing so, they tried to create hard class barriers that would have meant that as a society, whether you went to public or private schools would become a determinant in how far you would go in life. Make no mistake, this was not an accident. This was planned, and it was implemented by the former government. And I just want to make sure that everyone at home knows where they can find out all of this information. If you go to the Commonwealth's MyGov website, you can have a look at all of our local schools. You can see how they're funded and who they're funded by and the levels of funding. You can also see their performance against the NAPLAN standards, not just as a raw fix of what happened at that school, but in terms of where they sit, in terms of advantage and disadvantage, and therefore what value adding they're doing in their classrooms. Because I can tell you, as a proud member for Lawler, we have public schools kicking way above their weight, doing extraordinary work where students are making 2+ years progress in the classrooms in our community. So I would encourage everybody at home, obviously it's often a question that I am asked, which school should I send my child to? Often asked in my community. And my advice to those parents is always the same. Go on the My School website, check out our local schools, check out the funding models, you can see all of that information, but you can also see how those schools are travelling, how they're progressing, and how they're value adding or not for local families and local students. So I want to make sure that our community is informed about these things. I want to make sure that our community understand that this government has their back, has the back of every child in our community, and most importantly, has the back of every teacher in our school systems, and has an intention for education to improve, has a clear intention, has commitments. We have committed to increasing the proportion of students leaving school with a Year 12 certificate to 83.8%, up from 76.3% in 2022. This would be the highest rate of Year 12 certification ever achieved, because under those opposite, guess what happened? Retention rates in schools dropped. That means fewer students finished Year 12, dropped dramatically. They're on their way back under a Labor government, as I would have expected. We're going to increase the proportion of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people aged 20 to 24 attaining a Year 12 or equivalent qualification to 96% by 2031. We are setting targets to measure our performance and our school's performance against. We're going to reduce the proportion of students in the needs additional support, NAPLAN category, for reading and numeracy by 10% and increase those in the strong and exceeding categories by 10% by 2030. Again, a real hard, fast target. We're setting a target to raise the student attendance rate to pre-COVID levels, up from 88.6% in 2023 The target is to get that to 91.4%. The Better Fairer Schools Agreement is truly an Australian effort. It comes together with the contribution of different levels of government, First Nations education representatives and independent education bodies. The reforms are key in achieving the Labor government's tertiary education target, ensuring that 80% of the workforce have a university degree or TAFE qualification by 2050, because that's what this country needs us to do. The reforms will increase transparency for taxpayer funds and their distribution into bettering the education system. We're going to support our teachers to do the things that they know and that we as a government know will make a difference in our classrooms. We're going to support school leaders to do that work. We're going to support every school in the country to do the best by our students. But most importantly, we are righting a wrong done under the previous government that baked in class systems into our education system, something that I know most Australians would never, ever want to see. I know that most Australians believe that our universal health system and our universal education system are the most important aspects of our egalitarian society, worth defending in every suburb, in every country town, and worth defending in this place every day. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. The member for Chisholm.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker. Education changes lives. I spoke about this in my very first speech. I spoke about both the impact on my own family's life that education had and of my deep commitment to ensuring that all children can access a great education in this country and the opportunities that that education provides. And as a great education can change individual lives, a great education system changes countries. We are seeing this in Australia now, due to our Better and Fairer Schools agreement. I see this in my visits to our terrific classrooms in Chisholm, my electorate. When a child learns to read, their world opens. When a teenager finishes school, their future expands. And when a government invests in education at the forefront of its agenda, it invests in the country's future prosperity and equality. This week marks 1 year since every state and territory made a very important investment through the Better and Fairer Schools Agreement, an investment not just about now, but about the future of this country. For the first time in the history of the Commonwealth, every government in Australia committed to putting public schools on a path to full and fair funding. Because when it comes to investment in our children, funding should not be discriminatory. We should also be very proud of the legacy Australia has had and the states have had pre-federation in establishing public education. It's something that is about the vision that Australia has always had about being fair and providing opportunity for all. We want every child to have every opportunity to thrive and harness what is the power of education and knowledge. The Better and Fairer Funding Agreement represents the largest investment by an Australian government in public education ever. It means an additional $16.5 billion over the next decade, and then another $50 billion in the decade after that. This isn't just about expenditure, it's about nation building. We know that funding alone is not enough, and it's how we utilise that funding that matters. That's why this agreement ties investment to evidence-based reform. Reform that helps children catch up, keep up and finish school. Reform that supports teachers and educators, and I really want to thank all of the teachers, support staff and educators for the work that they do each and every single day in all of our schools and in our public schools in Victoria. We want reform that ensures that no child is held back, no child is left behind just because of their postcode or what school that they attend. 1 year on from this agreement, we are already starting to see great results. School attendance is going back up. After falling under the previous government from 93% to 86%, attendance is now improving again, rising to nearly 89% in 2025. And we are seeing early improvements in NAPLAN results, with more students reaching the highest level of proficiency. This is really encouraging, and this matters because when children are in school, they learn. And when they learn, they succeed. And they find out who they want to be and how they can contribute to our shared Australian story. We're also seeing more young Australians finishing school. In 2025, 12,000 more students completed high school than the year before. So that means that 12,000 more futures have been opened and there are more opportunities created. And there are more ways that people can contribute to their neighbours and their society. We're also seeing more people are choosing to become teachers. Now, I've got a lot of teachers in my family. I know what a fine profession it is. I know how hard the work can be at times. And it's really encouraging to see people wanting to take that step and pursue this very important career. After years of decline under the former coalition governments, where education policy kept chopping and changing, it was very inconsistent, we saw a 22% drop in students choosing to study education. But now in 2026, the numbers are rising again for the third year in a row. And that's because the Albanese Labor government understands that if we want a great education system, we need great teachers. And I'm sure everyone in this house can recall a teacher in their life that had a huge effect on them. We need to support great teachers. And that's exactly what this agreement does. It invests in evidence-based teaching, ensuring teachers have the tools that work. It supports early intervention, like phonics and numeracy checks, so we can identify problems before they grow. It funds small group tutoring, so no student falls permanently behind. And it strengthens wellbeing support, so students are ready to learn. Education is not just about classroom and academics, it's about building our children up as Australians, which means building up their confidence, providing opportunity, and making sure they're treated with dignity. Fairness is the foundation of this agreement, Deputy Speaker, and for too long, not every school in Australia has been funded to the level that it needs. That disadvantage has influenced outcomes. It's meant people haven't been able to access the opportunities that every Australian deserves. This agreement changes that. It puts every public school on a path to full and fair funding. It closes the gap and it ensures that a child's future is not determined by their postcode. Talent is in our children and our educators everywhere in this country, and opportunity should be too. The benefits of getting this right are enormous. When more students finish Year 12, they earn more, up to about 20% more over their lifetime. And when more young people succeed, our economy grows. This is good for all of us. In fact, lifting completion rates could add $65 billion to the economy by 2050. So it's not just about education policy. This is about economic policy. It's about social policy. This is how we build Australia's future, a better future, which is the sentiment behind every single decision that the Albanese Labor government has made. It's important to recognise, though, amongst all of this, that we're not quite there yet in terms of achieving what we can in this space. There is still more work to do, and that's why this agreement is not a quick fix. It's a 10-year plan, and it is a plan to lift literacy and numeracy, a plan to improve attendance, and to increase Year 12 completion. It's also a plan to build a stronger, more sustainable teaching workforce. And most importantly, it's a plan to deliver real results, not just promises, as we've seen under previous governments. Importantly, we're measuring progress here. We're reporting progress. We're holding ourselves accountable. This agreement operates in conjunction with our other education reforms, whether that be paid prac placements for teaching students, making the HEC systems fairer, investing in infrastructure. So parents can see the difference, teachers can feel the difference, and students can live the difference and harness the power of education every day. At the heart of all of this is the idea that every child deserves a great education. Not just some children, every child. When we get the settings right, when we make sure that every child has the chance to succeed, we don't just change lives, we change the country. A good education changes lives. We're building something really big here, a great education system, one that builds a fairer society and one that secures Australia's future, a better future. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. The member for Leichhardt.
Next sitting.
The question is that the debate be adjourned and the resumption of the debate be made in order of the day for the next sitting. All of those opinions say aye, against say no. I think the ayes have it, and I call the clerk.
Government business, statements, further statements on the Royal Commission into the Robo debt scheme.
Are there any statements? The member for Ford.
Deputy Speaker, I rise to make a statement in regard to the Royal Commission into the Robo debt scheme, and in some ways I think the finalisation of what has been a truly harrowing process for individuals involved in this, and for the country as well, to really see, I think, a situation where a government conducted an illegal enterprise. There is no other way to describe what they did as being illegal. And in fact, the Royal Commission found that robo-debt was a cruel and crude mechanism that was neither fair nor legal, and it made many people feel like criminals. In essence, people were traumatised on the off chance that they might owe money. It was a costly failure of public administration in both human and economic terms. And so it was that it was something that I was involved with at the time, prior to being elected to here, even though I like to remind people that I had a life outside of politics, being a station hand and working construction, but I did work for a senator before I got elected for a few years, just as the robo-debt enterprise was starting to have its effects felt out in the community. And so it was something that I was trying to help people through as an electorate officer through a very complicated process where we were just stonewalled by the department and the government at the time. And some of the human consequences of that, I think, are what need to be kept in mind when we talk about this. And so it's something that I was familiar with, and I just went back to the Royal Commission itself and came across a statement of a woman who I haven't met before, but who would be well known to the community, Kathleen Madgwick, who has turned tragedy into purpose, and who has fought hard for vulnerable people as they come up against government departments, and particularly Centrelink. And the tragedy is the worst kind. It involved the suicide of her 23-year-old son. So Kathleen's son is Jared. Two Queenslanders, originally from Victoria, but they settled in Queensland, in Tin Can Bay and Mackay. And so I'll just read out a bit of her testimony which she gave to the Royal Commission, which she wrote, provided a written submission to the Royal Commission. So Jared had been through a lot. He'd had finally been through a lot with Centrelink, I should say, trying to sort out a payment. He'd worked a bit on and off, but anyway, it got to the point where she thought that it had finally been resolved and he was going to get a payment. So they were living together. She said, and there's just a bit of it that I'll quote here, but she said, so it was that in one afternoon in May 2019, Jared seemed happier was in his bedroom listening to music, and I remember him talking about joining the army, which was a plan he had for his future. At about 4:45 that same afternoon, I remember that Jared came out of his room and said to me something like, "I'm not going to get paid because I owe them $2,000 and I will never get out of debt." He was very upset. He was talking about a debt that he had to DHS. This was the first time that I'd heard him say anything about a debt to DHS. At around 5 p.m. that same evening, Jared came out of his room. He'd been working on a cover letter for a job application at a meatworks. He asked me what I thought about his cover letter, and as I read it, I saw he'd written something that I thought wasn't really appropriate for the job. I gave him some feedback, knowing that he had written it in the afternoon while he was frustrated with DHS, but he started swearing at me and saying, and I won't quote the full thing, but "What the F do you know?" We exchanged words and he went back to his room. It was not usual for him to swear at me like that, and I was annoyed by it. I thought I'd let him cool down, so I left him alone. When we went out that night at around 6:45 p.m, I believed he was going for a walk to clear his head. At around 7:30 p.m. that night, I got a text from Jared saying that, "I love you." I was glad to receive this text, as I thought it had meant he had calmed down. The next morning, I woke up and saw that Jared wasn't home. I sent him a text, rang him, and sent him a message on social media, but I received no response. I was starting to get worried, as it was not like him to not respond for an extended period of time. I called Queensland Police on 31st of May, and they said they'd start looking for him. I took some comfort from that and resigned myself to waiting to hear from Jared. QPS rang me, Queensland Police rang me around 6:45 a.m. on the next day, and I jumped at the phone call, but they were only calling to say they hadn't started looking for Jared yet. I told QPS that I couldn't wait because I was really concerned now. It had been a whole day and night since I'd heard from him. I set off walking shortly after that phone call, and I remember thinking that I would go over to the park, thinking that he might be hiding out there. I took Jared's dog Cooper with me on my walk. As I went down into the bushes and into the park, I saw in the corner of my eye what I thought was a jumper in a tree. As I got closer, I saw that it was Jared. He had hung himself. In the days following Jared's death, I tormented myself thinking about the fight we'd had about his cover letter. I felt like a bad mother. As time went by, I came to realise that his suicide was not because of our argument. We disagreed in the past over minor things, and this was one such disagreement. While Jared had been struggling with money and felt the pressure of bills that he had to pay, I do not believe he had been living with suicidal intent for an extended period of time. We had been at the beach a day before his death, and he had been caught in a rip while out swimming. When he had saved himself and got back to shore, he expressed to me how disappointed he was at his level of fitness and spoke about how keen he was to get fit again as part of his plan for the future. I believe that the pressure of Jared's financial situation and going from thinking he was getting a payment after it initially being rejected to believing that he was not going to receive any money for some time flipped a switch for him. I do not believe that his debt was the only thing that bothered him. It was a confluence of factors, with the debt from Centrelink being the final thing that made him feel like he could go on. In some ways, I feel like I should sit down now because no message is as powerful as Kathleen Madgewick's, a one-time resident of Mackay. But I think that the work that she's doing needs to be acknowledged. and how important it is that government services are there to do the job which they're supposed to do. And the one thing that this government has done over the last almost 4 years now that we've been in government is that we have restored integrity and we have restored capacity to the public service. It is something which is not abstract at all when you think about Kathleen and Jared. It's about something which has a vitally significant impact on individuals' lives, whether it is the 41,000 veterans who are waiting for their claims to be assessed, whether it is the mess that we were left with the NDIS, the public service that was run down, I think, resulted in the death of Jared, but it results in the underselling of so many Australians and their abilities. And I thank you for the time.
Thank you. Are there any statements? The member for Kooyong.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Robo-debt was the largest failure in public administration in Australia's history. 2 weeks ago, on 11th of March 2026, the National Anti-Corruption Commission released its investigation into robo-debt. Unfortunately, the clearest takeaway from this investigation is that our Federal Integrity Commission has been a profound disappointment and that steps have to be taken as a matter of urgency to restore public trust in our most public-facing anti-corruption agency. The origins of the NAC's investigation into robo-debt only reinforce that disappointment. Disappointment in the effectiveness of the NAC, in its integrity and its transparency, and its leadership. Deputy Speaker, in 2023, the Robo-Debt Royal Commission referred 6 individuals to the NAC to determine whether they engaged in corrupt conduct. At the time, the Commissioner, Major General Paul Brereton AM, declared a conflict of interest. Recognising that he should not be involved in decision-making, he delegated his powers to his Deputy Commissioners and appeared to recuse himself from the inquiry. Nearly a year later, the NAC made the extraordinary decision not to investigate the Robo-Debt 6, suggesting that the conduct of the individuals involved had been fully ventilated by the Royal Commission. That decision prompted more than 1,200 public complaints, including many from the electorate that I represent, many highlighting the lack of accountability and the breach of public trust that this finding represented. In the wake of a Royal Commission which effectively and with transparency exposed dishonest, secret and unlawful conduct, the NAC's decision sent a woeful, incredibly disappointing message to the victims of the robo-debt scheme. Worse still, the NAC inspector later found that the conditioner, despite his prior declaration of a conflict of interest, had been involved in this decision. In doing so, the supposed custodian of public trust had himself engaged in officer misconduct. Unfortunately, Deputy Speaker, the Commission's leadership continues to be marred by controversy. Just last month it was announced that the Office of the Inspector will undertake a second investigation into complaints of officer misconduct in relation to Mr Brereton's involvement with the Australian Defence Force. The NAC is not delivering on its promise. Public confidence has been eroded and its credibility has been weakened. This is not the National Anti-Corruption Commission that Australia envisaged when in 2022 I and other independents who had called for it and advocated for it were elected. My constituents still believe that the NAC can be an institution for public good, that it can be the strong and independent watchdog that Australians were promised. But that's not going to happen if we don't restore confidence in its leadership and if we don't significantly change how it interfaces with the Australian public. Mr Brereton was appointed as a Commissioner for a 5-year term. That should not be a shield from accountability. When public trust has been so clearly damaged, this Parliament should not just wait for time to pass and hope that that confidence will return. Section 250 of the NAC Act 2022 provides for the termination of a NAC Commissioner for misbehaviour or incapacity. I call on the government to consider this. I also call on the government to consider reforming Section 250 of the NAC Act to ensure the automatic removal of a NAC commissioner in the event that he or she is found to engage in corrupt conduct. And I call on the government to legislate such that in future such investigations of the NAC are by default undertaken with open hearings. The Act currently allows the Commissioner to determine whether hearings are held in public or in private based on a broad public interest test. This discretion has been overwhelmingly exercised in favour of privacy. That has to change. The first and most important reform is structural. We have to have a legislative presumption in favour of public hearings, with private proceedings reserved for specific and genuine exceptions. There are legitimate reasons, which we've discussed in this place many times: national security, witness protection, active law enforcement operations, in which some proceedings have to be held in private. But they should be the exception, not the default. The power of sunlight is not just symbolic. Research consistently shows that transparency in public integrity bodies increases deterrence. And when the single most high-profile, most highly publicly anticipated matter before the Commission was heard behind closed doors, despite the victims, the advocates and journalists calling for transparency, that sent a message to those affected by robo-debt. It sent a message that that Commission is not so different from the other government institutions that they very justifiably mistrust. The NAC has to become more outward-facing. Its website, its referral processes, its public communications should be designed for the public, not for lawyers. And it has to have a greater interface with and acceptance of referrals from whistleblowers. Deputy Speaker, the failures of the NAC leadership have diverted time and attention away from the matters that it was established to investigate. For almost 3 years, 56 pages of the Robo-Debt Royal Commission's final report were kept secret as the NAC stalled on the need for further investigation and possibly referrals. Now the final NAC report has found insufficient evidence to prove unlawful behaviour beyond reasonable doubt. Those findings of the NAC are beyond disappointing. 2 of the Robo-Debt 6 were found to have engaged in misconduct, but the others, despite being intimately involved in the design and implementation of Robo-Debt, were effectively exonerated. Commentators have suggested that they demonstrate a failure of the NAC to apply rigorous standards. Corruption, as we saw in public office, as we saw in the case of the illegal Robo-Debt scheme, is not a victimless crime. Robo-Debt was not victimless. There were many victims. And the real cost of the NAC's inability to investigate effectively is being borne by those Australians whose lives were destroyed by robo-debt, families who were wrongfully pursued, individuals who were left financially and emotionally traumatised, and citizens whose trust in government was shattered. The NAC's failure to hold those responsible to account leaves those Australians without justice. And it leaves the broader public with the troubling message that those in our seats of power are afforded more procedural fairness than everyday Australians. Those concerns are now being compounded and escalated by the government's increasing use of automated assessment tools in aged care and disability. We're seeing it again. The government seems to have learnt nothing from this very recent lesson, and it seems inevitable that without change, we are doomed to repeat those errors of the past. We need to legislate guardrails for how our public service uses automated decision-making tools before we cause the same sort of harm to Australians in the disability and aged care sectors that we've already inflicted on them with robo-debt. Deputy Speaker, we can't allow the legacy of robo-debt to be one of grief, silence and impunity. The victims of that scheme deserve recognition, accountability and redress. Any institution that claims to protect public integrity can never lose sight of the individuals that it exists to serve. And that is why I'm calling on the government to institute new leadership of our integrity watchdog. and to review very carefully the legislative settings around the NAC, to increase the extent to which it's outward-facing, to increase its transparency. We have to restore faith in this critical body, and we can do that only by demonstrating real commitment to its transparency and its effectiveness. Sunlight is still the very best medicine, and we need the NAC to provide sunlight on the dealings of our government and of our public service.
I call the member for Sturt.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I just start by acknowledging the contribution of my friend, the member for Ford, who spoke before the member for Kooyong, and thank him for his courage in sharing the moving and horrific story of Jared, which illustrates the significant harm that was caused to Australians through the Robo debt scheme. As we heard from the member for Ford, some of that harm cannot be undone and lives were lost or destroyed because of Robo debt. To say it was a gross failure of public administration is an understatement. It was a catastrophic failure. Its design and implementation meant it was always going to be a failure because of the lens through which it was created. It always considered the social safety net to be a problematic burden on the economy, and thus something to be eliminated. It also always considered those who use the social safety net as rotters, people who were lazy, actively avoiding work and looking to take advantage of public funds just because they could. Like new mothers who were accused of being double dippers, people using the broad social safety net in this country and who were victims of robo-debt were treated like criminals. Now, budget control and debt reduction are important, Deputy Speaker, but there are ways to achieve this without grouping together individual Australians using the social safety net under the umbrella of rotters or dodgy welfare recipients or bludgers. Finding savings in the budget doesn't have to exclusively mean cutting services and reducing support and targeting vulnerable Australians in the hope that they lack sufficient agency and resources to challenge what is happening to them. That is what Robo-debt did, Deputy Speaker. It was lazy budget control. No other ideas to reform the budget? No problem. Vulnerable Australians are available. Robo-debt found a group of vulnerable people that were considered easy targets, and the architects of the scheme hoped that they wouldn't say anything or speak up. And now we know that some of them can no longer speak up because they are no longer with us. People's lives have been destroyed, in many cases irreparably. The human impacts of robo-debt look like this: families struggling to make ends meet, receiving a debt notice at Christmas, young people being driven to despair by demands for payment, and horribly, the account of a young man's suicide. This can never happen again, and thanks to many stakeholders, but especially the countless victims who tirelessly advocated for themselves and others, it won't. Now, the reality, Deputy Speaker, is that the social safety net is designed to provide a basic level of financial and social support to individuals and families in need, helping to alleviate poverty and prevent economic hardship. Social safety nets play a critical part in reducing income inequality by providing a safety net for low-income individuals and families, helping to ensure a minimum standard of living. An effective social safety net can help to break the poverty trap by providing resources and support to individuals and families, enabling them to access opportunities and improve their economic situation. Because even in this great and successful country, not everyone has the same opportunity to contribute, to access paid work, or to work as much as they want to. Illness, disability, accidents, or acting as a carer for others, things that no one wishes for, sometimes intervene to limit the contribution an individual can make. And sometimes it's simply a case of lightning strikes, meaning access to a fair and effective social safety net is critically important. It's also important, however, to strike that balance between the optimal level of government intervention to provide support and the promotion of agency and individual self-reliance. But seeking help when help is genuinely needed is not rorting. It's not dodgy. It's a human story. As the Royal Commission found, robo-debt was a crude and cruel mechanism, neither fair nor legal, and it made many people feel like criminals. In essence, people were traumatised on the off chance they might owe money. It was a costly failure of public administration in both human and economic terms. From 2016 to 2019, the robo-debt scheme raised more than 500,000 inaccurate Centrelink debts through a method of income averaging, which has since been ruled unlawful. Debts were imposed on Australians who then had to prove they didn't owe them. This required them to hunt down old pay slips and bank statements, which was a time-consuming and stressful process rife with confusion and anxiety, heightened when Centrelink set debt collectors or garnished their payments without their knowledge. Beyond the burden of repaying debts, the scheme caused an incalculable amount of stress and hardship for thousands of Australians, created by a government system that was meant to support and protect them. Following the Royal Commission into the robo-debt scheme, the Albanese Labor government accepted all 56 of the Royal Commission's recommendation for reform and has so far implemented 52 of them, with the implementation of the final 4 underway, and noting that 3 remaining recommendations require legislative reform. One of the recommendations from the report of the Royal Commission touched on the effects of robo-debt on individuals and recommended that policies and processes under the auspices of Services Australia had a primary emphasis on the recipients the services are meant to support. This recommendation speaks to the human element of needing support, including the need to avoid language and conduct which reinforces feelings of stigma and shame associated with the receipt of government support when it is needed, including explaining processes clearly and in plain language and taking all practicable steps to avoid the possibility that interactions with the government might exacerbate those stresses or introduce new ones. The Albanese Labor government's Tell Us Once policy is, for example, designed to streamline government interactions for individuals who are accessing the social safety net. Other critical recommendations, including having improved and clear dispute resolution and complaint processes so that affected individuals understand the decisions being made and have a much greater awareness of their rights and how to activate them, with Services Australia now required to refer them to adequately resourced legal and non-legal services as necessary, and also to financial counsellors and community legal centres and legal aid commissions. Training for Services Australia staff, including executive staff, being trained in and spending time in frontline roles so they can interact with vulnerable Australians and gain a greater appreciation of the social safety net and why people access it. The human stories. This was another key recommendation. Because for a system to work fairly, it must be accurate and adequately resourced with properly trained staff and high-quality services that are responsive to an individual need. Computer says no must not be the default way every time. Improved safeguards, transparency and oversight must keep the social security system in check and include human-led oversight mechanisms for any automated decision-making processes. And this is because humans are unique. Their needs are unique. Recognising and reflecting this is critical to ensure fairness and adequacy of services, because if services are provided but they are inadequate or not appropriately tailored, then it doesn't advance, improve or eliminate the adverse position of the affected individual. It leads to repeat inquiries, the use of duplicate resources and ultimately more unnecessary cost to the Australian taxpayer. Finally, the government has also reached agreement on what will be the largest class action settlement in Australian history if approved by the Federal Court. This would see the Commonwealth pay $475 million as compensation for the harms caused by the robo-debt scheme. The size of this settlement reflects the harm caused to vulnerable Australians by the heartless and disastrous policies of the former Liberal government. It is also a reflection of the Albanese Labor government's determination to not only address the harms caused by the robo-debt scheme, but is an illustration of this government's approach to integrity and transparency with respect to the provision of public services.
Thank you. I call the member for Curtin.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I want to start by sending my condolences to the thousands of Australians who were wrongly pursued under robo-debt, which will remain a very dark stain on our history. Robo-debt didn't happen because of a couple of bad actors. It happened because a culture of compliance replaced a culture of integrity, where ministers and departments prioritised budget outcomes over human lives. The NAC's findings lay bare the limits to its ability to deliver justice to those impacted by robo-debt, especially in the absence of public hearings. And the lack of criminal referrals provides cold comfort to the hundreds of thousands of Australians who were wrongly pursued by robo-debt, particularly the families who lost loved ones. Now, this has left the families who have fought tirelessly for the truth for the last 9 years pretty devastated. And the simple truth is that robo-debt was an unlawful system introduced to improve a government's bottom line by punching down on some of the most vulnerable Australians. Robo-debt was cruel, it was illegal, and the government knew it. It was a shocking low point of unethical behaviour in the Australian public service. And the Albanese government must learn from the mistakes of past governments, particularly when alarm bells are ringing on NDIS and aged care assessments right now. So what can we do differently to prevent this happening again? Well, there are a number of things, but part of what we can do is about automated decision-making. To restore trust in the public service, Australians deserve full transparency of how government decisions are made when their lives are affected, especially when those decisions are automated. Robo-debt exposed the very real risks of automated decision-making in government. Automated decision-making, or ADM, is the use of automated technology to make decisions or assist humans to make decisions. And it can be low risk. For example, the government uses ADM to automatically calculate, process and transfer your Medicare rebate after you visit the doctor. But it can also be high risk. And the use of high-risk ADM is only increasing, particularly with the growth of AI technologies. Today, automated tools are being used or proposed in complex high-impact areas like aged care and the NDIS. In these systems, human assessments feed into automated tools that determine support packages. And in some cases, human decision-makers cannot override the result, even on review. These are decisions that profoundly affect people's lives, health and dignity. Without transparency of how these systems work, there's growing concern and fear in our communities. If we fail to act, we're at risk of repeating the same pattern we saw with robo-debt, different systems but the same underlying failure. The Royal Commission saw this clearly. Among its recommendations was the need for a clear legislated framework governing automated decision-making in government to ensure transparency, accountability and legality. And that recommendation was made nearly 3 years ago. Since then, there have been consultations, there are guidelines, there are policies covering some uses of artificial intelligence, but we still do not have a comprehensive mandatory framework that applies across government, including to the kinds of rules-based systems that caused robo-debt in the first place. So while the warning was heard, the action has not followed, and it's increasingly ridiculous to hear the government talk about the coalition's robo-debt failures when it has done nothing to actually make the system better, nothing to ensure it won't happen again. And that's why I'm putting forward a new idea to push the government to action on this. I'm calling for a new framework to govern the use of automated decision-making in government, and this must be legislated and it must be mandatory. At its most basic level, we need a framework to ensure government decisions are safe, lawful and fair. A robust framework ensures automated systems are tested before use, appropriate to the task and governed by clear lines of accountability. It would help prevent decisions that are unlawful by design. It would ensure humans remain accountable where human judgment is required, and it would create clear pathways to correct mistakes quickly before harm escalates. And this is the minimum standard that Australians should expect after Robo-debt. It's not just about preventing harm. Automated decision-making also presents genuine opportunities. When it's designed well, it can make governments faster, more consistent and more responsive. It can reduce backlogs, it can streamline routine rules-based decisions, and it can free up public servants to focus on complex cases where empathy, judgment and discretion are needed most. In a system under pressure from growing demands, constrained resources and rising expectations, these efficiencies do matter. But those benefits will only be realised if the government has the confidence to deploy automation responsibly and if the public has the confidence that it will be used fairly. Without a clear framework, departments are left to navigate these risks on their own. Some become overly cautious, others push ahead without sufficient safeguards. A clear legislated framework would give certainty, would allow innovation within boundaries and support better decision-making. Now, none of this is possible without trust. Robo-debt did enormous damage to public trust in government decision-making, particularly in automated systems, and that damage has not healed on its own. And I saw this clearly in my own community consultation that I undertook last week. More than 750 constituents responded to my survey about automated decision-making. More than 3/4 of respondents said they were uncomfortable with the government using automated systems to help make decisions about them. An overwhelming majority supported mandatory legislated rules. The message was clear. People don't trust ADM. Trust is not built through slogans or assurances. It's built through transparency, accountability and meaningful rights of review. Without a framework, every new automated system will be met with scepticism and fear, no matter how well-intentioned. With a framework, we can rebuild confidence and allow government to genuinely harness the benefits of responsible automation. So what does a good automated decision-making framework actually involve? Well, at a high level, it needs 3 pillars. Firstly, transparency. People have a fundamental right to understand decisions that affect them, particularly when those decisions are made by machines. A strong framework requires transparency at 3 levels. At the system level, there should be public visibility over where automated decision-making is used. A public register of ADM systems would allow security, accountability and informed debate. At the decision level, people must be informed when an automated decision has been used in a decision about them, and this should never be hidden. And at the explanation level, people must be given meaningful reasons for decisions in plain language. If a system cannot explain how it reached an outcome, it has no place in decisions that affect people's rights or livelihoods. Transparency is simply essential to build trust in ADM. The second pillar is strong decision-level controls. Not all decisions are the same, and a framework must be risk-based. Before any automated system is deployed, its risks should be assessed. Some decisions, particularly those involving discretion, complexity or significant potential harm, may simply be inappropriate for automation. Where automation is used in high-risk contexts, clear safeguards are essential. There must be a human who's accountable for the decision and its outcomes. Responsibility cannot be delegated to an algorithm. And for high-impact decisions, there must be meaningful human involvement, including the ability to override or correct an automated outcome. Automation should support decision-making, not replace responsibility. The third pillar is review and oversight. One of the most damaging aspects of robo-debt was how difficult it was to challenge. When people did challenge it, the system pushed back repeatedly. A good framework ensures people can quickly raise concerns and seek review, particularly where delay could cause serious harm. It also requires ongoing monitoring and testing of automated systems so errors are identified early, not after years of damage. And critically, there must be independent oversight. Without an independent body empowered to enforce the rules, a framework risks becoming aspirational rather than real. Independent oversight ensures compliance, accountability and continuous improvement, because rules only matter if they're followed. The robo-debt scheme was unlawful at the time, but without a well-resourced oversight body, it was left unchallenged. A new framework governing the use of ADM in government is essential and will only work if it includes strong oversight. Robodebt was a profound failure, and it's time we did something so it doesn't happen again. We need a legislated framework for automated decision-making, and this must include requirements for transparency, strong decision level controls and provisions for oversight and review. And this framework would support the government in unlocking increased efficiency for automation and present minimal risk-based compliance requirements to departments and agencies. It would also build trust. It's time to show Australians that we've learned from Robodebt and that we're prepared to do what's needed to prevent it from happening again.
Thank you. I call the member for Macon.
Deputy Speaker, and I move that the Federation Chamber do now adjourn.
Thank you. I call the member for Monash.
I second the motion.
Thank you. I call the member for Mayo.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, the issue that is being discussed in every house in my electorate around every dinner table is fuel, both the cost of fuel and whether people can access fuel. Certainly there are many service stations in my electorate because we have so many independent distributors and in a region that are without fuel or are having to effectively ration the stock that they have. It's causing enormous anxiety in regional Australia because whether you're a dairy farmer, whether you are a grape grower and trying to get all the grapes off the vine, or whether you are a broadacre farmer and you're thinking about putting in your next crop, hoping that we're going to get some rain in April. And I think that that's part of the reason why there is such a fear and such a need to stockpile fuel. Now, I know that, the government has told people not to stockpile fuel, but when your livelihood depends on fuel, when your livelihood depends on having that diesel, when the animals on your property depend on that diesel for their ability to survive, it is a precarious situation. So that's the issue around having the fuel, and I would just urge the government. I know that on Monday, I think the government's national cabinet's been meeting regularly, something that of course I absolutely support. But there must be a strategic plan about how to get fuel to the regions, because it's the regions that grow the food, it's the regions that feed the cities, and I might just say, for those who are not growing the food, it's not like we can just get up 10 minutes earlier and get on that bus or get on that train. We have very limited public transport across regional Australia. And so we are reliant upon our cars, we are reliant upon our utes, and we are reliant upon our generators. That is just life in regional Australia. And so I would urge when the government meets with all of the state and territory leaders that the needs of regional Australia are put absolutely at the front of the queue with respect to fuel. Deputy Speaker, we need to talk about the fuel excise. The fuel excise is crippling Australians with this massive increase in fuel at the moment. Right now, every Australian, for every litre of fuel we buy, pays 52.6 cents in the litre in government tax. On top of that, GST on that excise. So that's a double tax, and then GST on the whole price per litre. So really, you could say that the Australian government, between GST and fuel excise, is getting the best part of nearly $1 for every litre of fuel. When you add on at the member for Macon is looking at me inquisitively, when you add 52.6 cents, plus when fuel is $3.30 a litre in many parts of Australia, you're looking at a GST component of around 30 cents. Now, add those two together, we're heading to more than 80 cents, member for Macon. That, to me, is just under $1 a litre, as far as I'm $1 for every litre that you buy. And so it is a huge expense for people, again, particularly living in the regions who have no other choice. The government supported the coalition, when there was a halving of the fuel excise that had an immediate relief effect during COVID. The government did support that when they were in opposition. And at that time, I think fuel was about $1.80 a litre. In my electorate, well over $3 a litre in many parts. And so it would just be logical that this would be a primary consideration for the government, that we look to address the fuel excise and provide that immediate relief to families right now. I know the government said, look, you know, we're providing tax cuts in the middle of the year. We do provide support for childcare. How does that help a pensioner or an unemployed person? They're not getting those tax cuts. They're not. If you're a pensioner, you're probably not likely putting a child in childcare. So I would say to the government, urgently address the fuel excise. We can do this now. It will have an enormous impact on Australians.
Calling the member for Newcastle.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I rise today to celebrate a remarkable young Novocastrian who has taken our city to the world stage. 17-year-old Nicholas Ridgway, a talented dancer from Newcastle, has earned the opportunity to represent Australia at the World Dance Movement in Italy. This is an extraordinary achievement from a young person pursuing their passion. Nicholas's journey is one of dedication, discipline and courage. Like so many young people in our community, he's spent countless hours training, refining his craft and striving to be the very best he can be. And now that hard work has paid off. Not just with personal success, but the chance to showcase Newcastle's creative talent on the international stage. What stands out about Nicholas's story is not just the achievement itself, but what it represents. It represents the strengths of arts education in our public schools, and I want to give his school a big shout out, the Hunter School of Performing Arts at Broadmeadow, nurturing lots of new emerging young talent in our region. But it also represents the support of families, teachers and mentors who are all involved in nurturing those young people and their talents going forward. And it represents a community that believes in backing young people to dream big. Nicholas is not just representing himself, he's representing Newcastle, and we are incredibly proud of him. Deputy Speaker, I want to recognise the storytellers in our community, those who capture the experiences, emotions and perspectives that make Newcastle unique. The recent announcement of winners from the 2026 Newcastle Herald Short Story Competition highlights the depth of creative talent in our region. And I would particularly like to congratulate this year's winner, Karen Whitelaw. Through her writing, Karen has demonstrated the power of storytelling to connect us, to reflect our shared experiences and to shine a light on the moments that define who we are. The competition invites local writers to transform everyday life into something meaningful and memorable. Stories that reflect our community, our resilience and our creativity. Competitions like this are so important because they create space for voices to be heard. And they encourage people to tell their stories. They build confidence in emerging writers and they remind us that the power of words to bring people together. Congratulations again to Karen Whitelaw on receipt of this highly regarded award. And Deputy Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the exceptional service of two young Novocastrians, Edith McNamara and Hamish Lawrence, who were recently recognised as the region's Junior Lifesavers of the Year. And while many teenagers are out enjoying their weekends, Edith and Hamish are out patrolling our beaches to prevent drownings and injuries. They're conducting rescues, they're providing first aid, they're setting up safe swimming zones between the red and yellow flags and educating the public on beach safety. They are making a profound contribution to the community and they're part of a very long and proud tradition of surf lifesaving in Newcastle, a tradition that's built on volunteerism, responsibility and care for others. I'm a very fortunate member in this parliament. I have 6 surf lifesaving clubs to represent, stretching from Stockton to Nobbies to Newcastle to Cooks Hill, Merriweather and Dixon Park. So they are all important contributors to our community, but Edith and Hamish are really exceptional examples of young people doing remarkable work. I note that Edith has already helped rescue a struggling swimmer during patrol, and Hamish is continuing to dedicate himself to building on his training and skills and protecting beachgoers. As I mentioned, these are not small contributions. These are real acts of service. They make a positive difference. And that what is so powerful about their stories is that they remind us that leadership doesn't have to wait till adulthood. It's happening right now. It's happening on our beaches, in our surf clubs, in our communities, in our sporting organisations. These are young lifesavers who are representing the very best of us, and they give me, and I know all Novocastrians, great confidence that our future is in very good hands. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. I call the Leader of the Nationals in the House.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And the Victorian Fisheries Authority has a very simple message for governments across Australia, for state governments and the federal government. It is time to get serious about carp. It is time for less talk and more action to control this insidious invasive species. Deputy Speaker, European carp are destroying our waterways. They are killing native species. They are causing enormous social, economic and environmental losses. And the impact on recreational fishing is extremely difficult to evaluate, but certainly enormous in terms of lost opportunities for our regional communities. Now, the Victorian Fisheries Authority has advised me there's enough carp in Australia today to fill the MCG 3.5 times over. Now, carp at times, Deputy Speaker, can amount to 90% of the fish biomass in some of our waters. Now, there's been thousands of pages of scientific research and investigation into how we manage carp and detailed reports on different approaches that are available to us. But the time for talk is over, Deputy Speaker. It's time for more action in relation to European carp. Now, in Gippsland, carp are actually out-competing native species in our rivers and our Ramsar-listed Gippsland lakes, and they're destroying the water quality and the biodiversity of our wetland. Our wetlands are overrun with carp, and our community wants to see more action. Deputy Speaker, people are simply frustrated by the delays. There is now a paralysis by analysis. The cost of inaction is enormous, and there has to be an acceptable level of risk when it comes to taking action, and the acceptable level of risk, I think, has been reached in terms of the research and the information we already have available to us. Now, the CSIRO, Deputy Speaker, has made it clear in relation to the potential release of the herpes virus to have an impact on the carp population. CSIRO researchers found, I quote, "The virus does kill Australian pest carps and it kills them quickly. Current research has also shown that the virus does not develop in native Australian species of fish." Now, that's important, Deputy Speaker, because obviously the CSIRO is independent, and it has disproved perhaps one of the major concerns in relation to whether the virus would then transfer onto other native Australian fish. Very clearly, CSIRO research, it kills them quickly, and the current research has also shown the virus does not develop in native Australian species of fish. Now, carp represent, as I said, about 90% of the total fish biomass in the Murray-Darling Basin. That's around 350 million carp. As I said, carp are degrading river health, they're ruining water quality, they're eroding banks, they're removing vegetation, they're out-competing, and they're preying on juvenile native fish, and they're increasing algae blooms and reducing biodiversity. Carp impact 22 species, many of which are rare and endangered. I've seen in my own electorate, Deputy Speaker, where the carp burrowing into the bank undermines the bank and end up with red gum trees which are hundreds of years old falling into rivers in our community. Now, the 2025 Murray-Darling Basin audit shows that carp are the key ecological pressure limiting native fish recovery. If we can reduce the biomass of the carp to a level where the native species can predate on the juvenile carp, we can turn the balance in this debate, Deputy Speaker, and get some great environmental outcomes across our nation. The impacts and the lack of action on carp is the key issue of concern raised by recreational fishers in my state of Victoria, and I'd imagine right across the nation. Now, the important thing to note here, Deputy Speaker, there is a way forward. There is a plan, and there's been an enormous amount of work done on this species, this invasive species. Australia's been researching carp biocontrol now for 49 years, and the carp herpes virus for the last 20 years has been subject to an enormous amount of consideration and culminating in the National Carp Control Plan of 2022. The department has commissioned further research on the carp virus with no clear timelines on it, and no clear timelines on if and when a decision will be made about the use of the virus. Now, the VFA, Victorian Fisheries Authority, is recommending trials to actually get the virus out in the waterways and judge the impact. And I would support them in their work, Deputy Speaker. We need to see more action. We need to see more boots on the ground doing practical environmental work and less suits in our cities making excuses when it comes to these natural resource management issues. So I agree entirely with the Victorian Fisheries Authority, Deputy Speaker, with their request of the government, both state and federal. Let's get serious about carp.
I call the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I did want to take a moment to acknowledge the fuel challenges that many of us in regional Australia are facing. I wanted to start by acknowledging and congratulating the people of my electorate in Bendigo. We have not experienced what other regions have talked about in terms of fuel shortages or bowsers running out. And I think it is a real credit to the people of the Bendigo electorate who did what was asked. They only took what they needed. We've not seen the stockpiling or those challenges that other areas have had. When the crisis first occurred, which I do say crisis because it's also one that is not of our making. So when Trump started the war in Iran and we saw we saw the challenge and then what's been rolling out since then, we did see a spike in demand, but we haven't seen that flow on to our bowsers running out of petrol. And it is because of the work of those locally listening and respecting and understanding that they should just buy what they need. That will help our farmers as we come into the sowing season. We're having favourable rain and that will help. But what we've also seen in our region, like in all parts of Australia, is that spike in prices. And that is a challenge. And I acknowledge it is a challenge for households and a challenge for businesses. APCO, we have APCO petrol stations in my electorate, and they're always busy and have been before the war started, and they continue to be so today. They always retail for about 20 cents cheaper than the other bowsers that we have on High Street. And if you're filling up a 50-litre tank, that 20 cents, you save about $10. And that does help, particularly people who are struggling to make ends meet. But what we are seeing at the moment, the unprecedented spike in prices, is a worry, and if it continues, will have a big impact not just on households and businesses, but on the economy. And that's why I really welcome what this Parliament is doing today and our government in introducing the legislation that will help get consumers a fair go at the petrol pump. We're putting petrol companies on notice and saying that we will not cop big Australia treating Australian consumers like mugs. And we are hoping that the Liberal and the Nationals vote with us on this bill to introduce tougher penalties for petrol companies that are doing the wrong thing by Australians. This is a real Team Australia moment where we need industry to work with government and with consumers to ensure that we have fairer prices at the petrol pumps. I do want to say to those locally who have asked me about fuel excise, why our government has decided not to cut that. Regardless of what you pay at the pump, fuel excise is fixed. That is a revenue that we collect on behalf of states that we put into roads maintenance and road infrastructure. It's one of the oldest taxes that we have in Australia. It has existed since Federation, and it's how we are fixing Epsom Road, the roads in Epsom like Howard Street. It is how we are fixing the roads in Pall Mall, the roads around Bendigo. It is how we are fixing our regional roads, the smaller roads. It's how we are funding roads to recovery, black spot funding for our roads, and it is how we are funding the Safer Roads program. So I would be concerned if we looked at fuel excise as a quick fix to this challenge, because it is how we collect revenue to ensure our roads are safe and as and helping our councils do the work that they need to do to keep our roads maintained. Deputy Speaker, I'm very proud to be a supporter of local women's sport in my electorate. Recently, we had the conclusion of another successful season of the Lisa Chester's Shield, which is the women's senior competition for the Greater Bendigo Cricket Association. I've been the proud sponsor of the Shield since 2021, and this year, Golden Square Cricket Club were again the Division 1 winners, an extraordinary strong team, but a demonstration that women at the club level like to play cricket in Bendigo, and I'm very proud that I continue to sponsor this. And in saying, as one cricket season ends, our women's football season begins. And I'm very proud to stand here today to update the House to let them know that the Kyneton women's football team, the Wedgetail Eagles, will get to play in our local competition. We're looking forward to the season starting over Easter. The Central Women's Victorian League is expanded and will thrive.
Thank you, and I call the member for Cowper.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, I had to check the calendar this morning, Deputy Speaker, to make sure it wasn't the 1st of April, because I didn't know whether to laugh or cry when the Labor member for Bruce introduced the Combating Illicit Tobacco Bill 2026, or as I like to refer to it, Combating Illicit Tobacco bracket, a problem we created and ignored for 4 years, close bracket, Bill 2026. Deputy Speaker, for 4 years I have stood right here and in the other place and warned this government about the illegal tobacco and vaping trade in this country. And have they listened? Absolutely not. Because this bill, which isn't worth the paper that it is written on, addresses none of the root cause of the problem that we are facing. I have provided on a platter, the solutions. As a former detective in the Drug Enforcement Agency, I have provided to the other side the solutions to this problem. What this bill does is nothing. It tinkers around the edges of penalties. Nobody's being prosecuted for this. There have been a handful of court cases in the last 4 years. You cannot walk down your main street, Deputy Speaker. I guarantee you cannot walk down your main street without passing at least one, if not several, of these pop-up tobacconists that are selling illicit tobacco under the counter or vapes, which are apparently illegal in this country, although you see everybody standing on corners smoking them, in particular in this place, in Parliament House. You cannot walk down your main street without seeing these pop-up stores. Deputy Speaker, I get calls from parents, I get emails from businesses about these pop-up stalls, about the disruption and the concern that people in our communities have. And not just because they're selling illicit, illegal products, but because of the damage it is doing to our society. I saw an extremely disturbing figure in recent times, and that is smoking rates have increased for the first time in 30 years. And more disturbing than that, the people who are taking it up more than ever are children under 18 because they can get access to it. Now, we don't need to tinker around the edges of penalties. The courts need to slam those who do get prosecuted, but we have to get to the prosecution stage. So what do we need to do? We need to develop a strategy that supports the law enforcement agencies, an agency that has direct sight to these people, these criminals, and I'll talk about the criminals in a moment. these criminals who are bringing these products into Australia, that are seeing excise go down by about $5 billion in one financial year on tobacco. And if we had a proper regime and legalised vapes, we would see another $7 billion in excise. And quality control, not garbage coming in from China that we don't know what's in there. And these people who are importing them are criminals of the worst kind. And the money that they earn is supporting sex slavery, serious drug offences, terrorism. So to put a rubbish piece of legislation on the table is an insult not only to this Parliament but to the Australian people. I will happily work with the other side to ensure that illegal vapes and illegal tobacco is wiped out, that business model is destroyed, because the Australian people deserve better.
I call the member for Paterson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise today to speak about an issue that is front of mind for families, workers and businesses right across my electorate of Paterson and indeed across the nation at the moment. It's the ongoing fuel crisis driven by the war in the Middle East. Global events are having real local consequences, from prices at the Bowser to the cost of groceries and the viability of transport businesses. This is not an abstract construct, it's happening now. And it's being felt in households and workplaces right across our community. We see you, we know what's happening. And in Paterson, we are seeing the impact firsthand. One business I want to acknowledge is Hills Tankers, a proud local company that plays a critical role not just in our region but nationally. They distribute fuel across Australia, supplying retail aviation and diesel fuels that keep industries operating and communities moving. They are part of the backbone of our economy. And I also want to recognise the people behind that success. Andrew and Vicky Hill have built a remarkable family business, supported by a strong leadership team. Sean and Scott in operations, Helen as Chief Financial Officer, and around 330 employees across Australia who keep this business running and our nation running too. But like so many in the transport sector right now, they are under real pressure. Deputy Speaker, Australians are practical and sensible people. When times are tough, we adapt. We see it every day. People riding motorbikes instead of driving, carpooling, working from home when they can. Australians are doing their bit, and they expect government to do the same, and that's why we have not stood still. It's just one part of our broad response. The Albanese government has been engaging directly with industry, listening to businesses like Hills Tankers and acting on their concerns. We've established a national fuel supply task force to coordinate our response and keep fuel flowing where it is needed. We've also, and we continue to have the meeting of the National Cabinet, and I know the Prime Minister is meeting with the Premiers next Monday. We've doubled penalties for fuel price gouging to protect consumers and small businesses through the ACCC, and we've acted to support the transport sector, allowing truck drivers and businesses to make emergency applications for contact chain orders so rising fuel costs can be managed fairly across the supply chain. Because without our truckies, without our businesses like Hills Tankers, supply chains simply don't function. We've also taken steps to increase fuel availability, easing supply pressures at a critical time. Deputy Speaker, this is about being connected and staying connected, not just in Canberra, but on the ground. We are working directly with businesses, industry groups and communities because they are living these challenges every day. And to Andrew and Vicky and their team, and every transport operator and worker in Paterson, we hear you, we see you, we know you're under pressure, but we also know that you are doing your bit for our nation at this moment. We are acting decisively and responsibly, and we want to support you, because in times like this, Australians can't be left to carry the burden on their own. We are going to continue to listen, to engage and to act in the best interests of communities like mine in Paterson. And I do want to send a shout out to all of those people who've done the responsible thing. They haven't hoarded fuel. They haven't bought jerry cans and bought too much fuel. They've done the right thing. But I also get those who have had to buy excess in order to keep their businesses going. So I know this is a matter of balance, but I just again want to say to all Australians, fuel is expensive at the moment. We understand the pressure that you are under. We know we need to continue to listen and to work for you here in Canberra, and that's what we intend to do, because that's what responsible government is all about. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is that the motion be agreed to. All those of that opinion say aye, and contrary no. I think the ayes have it. The Federation Chamber stands adjourned until 10:30 a.m. Monday, the 30th of March 2026.